All right, everybody, welcome back to the show, Jiu-Jitsu Motivation Podcast. My name is Greg Melita, black belt, second degree, owner of Hampton's Jiu-Jitsu.
And I'm Brian DeLuca, black belt and author of Jiu-Jitsu for Small People and Other Weird Shit I Think About.
Today we got an absolute legend on, Mr. Frank Shamrock. Really appreciate you coming on, and just it's just having you on is just awesome for us, both of us. We know that. I mean, just a legend in the sport, everything that you've done. So really appreciate you doing this today.
Yeah, man. No, thanks for having me.
So yeah, let's start off. I mean, I actually have the old book, The Lion's Den, Inside the Lion's Den.
Yeah,
and I remember getting that book and seeing you in there and just following you guys. I was actually early in my wrestling in high school and getting into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and we all. A lot of people obviously probably seen your documentary. That was amazing. Yeah. So really just hearing those old days of coming through, with the Lion's Den and Ken and all that. And it was just an amazing story, but kind of, take us through, you don't have to go all through the entire history, but I like to start with Inside the Lion's Den because that was my introduction to you and the training, so coming through there, with Bob Shamrock and all of that, and then being introduced. How is that as far as like it taking over your life in that aspect?
It was really powerful. Like just having, the purpose and the focus, like something so powerful. Because if you screwed it up, you were going to get, your ass kicked, which is always a problem. And then having that community there, like some people support you, and when you're bleeding, like fix you up, and that was the first time I really experienced that. Was when I entered the Lion's Den. And even though it was tough, brutal, we were beating the hell out of each other, and nobody really knew about fighting at the time. It was extraordinary to be amongst, modern day warriors, like fighting it out. And then, you find out at the end of the day, everyone's a martial artist, everyone's family man, everyone's dad, like everyone's just trying to, be successful in this career of fighting.
Yeah. Some from the documentaries, right? You had a rough start, right? As a kid. Yeah. And how much was the structure important of martial arts, like getting into martial arts for you?
Yeah, I think it was super important. I mean, I know it was super important. It just now my life is automatic, so I don't think about it. But that was definitely a thing I was missing, as a youth, having good structure, good parental, guidance, team sports, stuff like that. That's why I think team sports are so good, because you learn to function in, high stress environments, celebrate, have camaraderie, community, goals. And I didn't get into team sports because I always get kicked out and had, some type of emotional issue or some, physical altercation. But when mixed martial arts came along, it was, to me, what a new sport was. Like, it was the same stuff. I didn't look at it any differently. That's what I thought sports was. As we were studying it. So it was cool. Like and that was one of my dreams, was to become a champion sports athlete. I just didn't really have a sport except for boxing that I, watched.
Yeah. I mean, some of the other, actually, what popped in my head when we knew you were coming on the show was, I remember I have like a library of just like DVD ROM, like ripped videos. And there was one of you that, it was a seminar you did. I don't know where it was, but it was a seminar, and you spoke about nutrition specifically. Mm-hmm. And I remember from Inside the Lion's Den book, there's a section on nutrition and, diet and all that. Do you still eat raw chicken is the question?
I don't. I've actually, only had raw chicken like a couple of times. And apparently I could do it at that time, but no, but I just eat good. And I still stick with those like very simple principles that I learned fighting, which is to be training all the time. You don't really want to be full, right? So you always want to be kind of, just enough fuel to do the next thing and be comfortable. So I learned to eat lean, and, that's where the size of my palm of my hand came in, that idea of just eating, what you need in that time, whenever that time is. So but it seems to be working. It was more of the need in martial arts at the time, but now, I do like intermittent fast. I just eat whenever I'm hungry. And if I'm not hungry, I don't eat. I'm like, well, why? I'm just sitting here hanging out. Like, why don't I need to eat anything? Drink some natural juice or have a piece of fruit. But like, I don't really need to eat anything. So, my mindset remains the same, but the application is different, because it needs different these days.
Yeah, I just remember the comment section lighting up, you know, just specifically about that. It's like, oh my God, he eats raw chicken.
Yeah.
What is that? You know?
It's like, and people didn't even know what salmonella was back then.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
right?
Yeah.
Everybody
No, I
said
knew, but
the secret to the Shamrock diet, eat raw chicken. You know, people were going nuts in the comments. It was just funny.
Yeah. Well, I think at that time it was very mystical, just like martial arts were, you know, I'd say through the 70s and 80s and, you know, until the UFC really came along. You know, it was kind of fantasy stuff. And, you know, in that world, there's just a lot of, you know, people are like, well, what's really going on? The truth is, like, we didn't know what was going on. We were, you know, I figured it out pretty quick because I grew up on the streets, you know, and I always asked questions and I took notes that people didn't have the answer, you know, but they were in a position of leadership where they were the toughest guy in town, or they were, you know, the coach. And even though they didn't have an answer, they'd be like, well, you know, this is the answer. And I'd be like, well, hey, when you start thinking about it, you know, they just didn't want to admit that they didn't know how to fight.
Right. And I mean, you had a lot to do with the foundations of mixed martial arts, right? In the United States, can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I came along at a pivotal time when, you know, they did the pay-per-view kind of, you know, scandal and someone's going to die, and they had great pay-per-view numbers. And it was an instant hit, the UFC. But then we got this big, huge social backlash, getting kicked off cable and, you know, getting negative headlines. And so the sport took a huge nosedive. And I just happened to come along like, hello, right at that time. And, you know, it's a great time in that the opportunity was endless. Like, you know, if you had talent, you could talk, you could fight, you could do anything, you know, there was huge opportunity. But huge opportunity at that time was, you know, tiny. It just wasn't a lot of money.
Right.
And then, you know, the last thing about me getting into the sport, like I love the idea of sporting and competing and having all that stuff, but I couldn't keep relationships, and I couldn't keep, because of all my, you know, child trauma and social issues, I didn't have the skills to maintain these healthy relationships that are required to do all these extraordinary things for long periods of time. And it was through martial arts I learned all that, you know, that I started teaching and communicating, and like, you know, like, oh wow, you know, this guy feels like I do, and wow, his arm hurts too after we did that. So it was a great human connector for me, the martial arts training, and then having the mindset of martial arts, even in the midst of this crazy fighting where I can tell people didn't know what they were talking about. They're like, yes, and this and that. And I'm like, hey, but listen, I understand biomechanics. And I'd ask questions, you know, and they probably thought, oh, Frank's a total, you know, dick. Like, why would he do that? But I was studying the art of fighting. So to me, it wasn't about martial arts, or like, you know, it wasn't about the martial arts journey that they'd been on or what they learned. It wasn't disrespecting anybody. Just needed the truth so Ken wouldn't punch me in the head and, you know, break my face.
Yeah, I mean, that's you know, speaking to the history of MMA. I mean, for me, I mean, obviously there was something with Congress and you know, calling it human cockfighting and then banning it, and then, you know, everything that happened. But for me, I really think, in my personal opinion, watching the UFC, it was you and Tito, that fight for me was like the change. Is like, wow, UFC is this legitimate like sport, like an actual, you know, respected, tough sport. You know, and that, to me, I saw the change where, you know, weight classes came about in the UFC. You know, it was all about it was conditioning. It wasn't just like getting Tank Abbott in there and, you know, doing a barroom brawl. You know what I mean? Seeing what styles beat each other. I think you were the first actual, you know, in my mind, the turn of the, you know, not the century, but, you know, the turn of martial arts, where it was about mixing it and actually embodying the term MMA and making it a sport. Was that your vision, or like, was that what you guys were training in the Lions then? It was about making it like about mixed martial arts to completeness and making it a long-term sport. Is that what it was?
Yeah, well, that became the, you know, secondary driving factor for a long time in my career, because, you know, at the time when I became UFC champion, I, you know, was setting all these records, I was doing all these things, but we had literally lost like 90% of our audience. So we just didn't have the numbers to, you know, make money, impact, you know, do all these different things. So it just took a while to build all that up and to create, you know, such a brand, such an opportunity that you can pick and choose, or do this or do that, or make deals, or, you know, fight in boxing, like whatever you want to do. But what I remember most about fighting was like every day you wake up and you're like, this is a sport I need to get out of. This is really dangerous.
It's sort of true, you know.
Yeah, every day you're like, hey, I lose a foot today. These are not good probabilities, you know, when you go to work. It's like being a lumberjack. You lumberjack guys, it's like the most dangerous profession. Like, how do those guys feel in the morning? They're like waking up, they're like, all right, have a great day, hon.
Yeah, the tree may fall on me. I'm not really sure what's gonna happen, but it's true. Like,
see you later.
yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because as fighters, right, we all, when we step onto the mat or you guys stepping onto the cage, you just don't know what's going to happen, you know, and I think it's one of the things that sort of propels us. Like, what could happen in this situation, like in this chaos, like what is going to happen, you know, during this fight?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a beautiful human expression, which is, you know, arguably the world's oldest, you know, it's fighting and the other F that are competing in the world, you know, oldest and funnest and, you know, things everyone wants to be doing. It's extraordinary. The whole, and I've watched you know, like watching Japan, because I started in the 90s and just watching them socially develop and become more westernized and, you know, accept, you know, different presentations and like watching their culture develop, watching our culture develop, because now I'm almost 50. You know, it's really interesting to see what people want to see in their fighting. You know, they want to see fighting. That's a given. But then, like, what is it, and what are the reasons, and that very, you know, in that way, it's very much what's happening socially, and you know, what's going on the streets. Like, it's very much how people are feeling, and that is a cool experience to be a part of when you're like the performer.
Yeah, take us through that, because specifically for this podcast with the Jiu-Jitsu Motivation, I wanted to bring up, you know, a lot of people don't realize the history that you have specifically, you know, fighting in pancrase in Japan, and then like the whole history of, you know, shoot fighting. You know, a lot of people don't realize, and the combination of that with the roots of catch wrestling specifically, you know, that was mostly the roots of the Lion's Den with you and Ken. I don't know if I'm right there. Can you bring us through that?
Yeah, that's right. You know, Ken first started training, oh God, I would butcher these names, with a couple of shooters back in the day. And then after a while, he got invited to Japan. And I know he trained and competed with the Fujiwara group. And over there, that's, you know, one of the legendary names of the basics of professional wrestling. And, you know, Japan just has a different mindset. Their professional wrestling is more real. You know, their presentations are different. So that's where our base comes from, is that whole, you know, Fujiwara system, which you see all throughout, you know, the fabric of mixed martial arts, especially in Japan. And it's a grappling based system, but it's slightly different because it's really secretly at its core based on entertainment. So it has more, you know, movement based activities. Most of the stuff is designed to be, you know, large motor, gross motor skills, so that you can create activity. And that's part of the sport itself, is that you perform hard and, you know, break things down, tire things out, grab things, you know, submissions. And then, you know, maybe the difference between jiu-jitsu and I learned all this in Japan. I was completely clueless until Ken beat me up and then was like, all right, well, here's how it works. I was like, really? It's not like in the movies where I'm going to do this kind of stuff, but all of a sudden I'll know these things and I'll go fight. So it's just a lot of, you know, drilling and conditioning and, like I said, you know, full body gross motor skill, things that you'll do while performing so you don't get tired.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people, when they think MMA, especially if people that just train jiu-jitsu, they think, oh, okay, you know, UFC, okay, Royce Gracie, people do Brazilian jiu-jitsu for their ground, and then they do some, you know, collegiate wrestling, and then they do Muay Thai and kickboxing. But, you know, a lot of people don't realize that there's a whole separate specific grappling based, you know, Japanese wrestling, catch wrestling specifically, which is, I mean, way older than even, you know, jiu-jitsu or Brazilian jiu-jitsu itself, that people don't realize. What was your, you know, since you came from that catch wrestling and shoot based background, when you were hearing, oh, you know, Gracie's jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, especially Ken fighting Royce that first time, you know, what was your view on it as to how it compared to what you guys did?
Well, at the time I hadn't so by the time Ken fought Royce, geez, I think I was still in prison. I don't think I'd gotten out yet, because I got out in 94. but it was just a huge mystery. I was there on the ground training, mopping mats, like, learning all this stuff. And I could hear how people talked about it. People nobody knew what was happening because it was new and it hadn't been exposed. We didn't have technology, we didn't have YouTube. Maybe we did. But you couldn't find this stuff and you couldn't understand it. So it goes back to the mystical martial artsy thing. It created all kinds of stuff. One of my funniest memories, I was probably 22, maybe 23 years old. I was cornering Ken, one of his bag boys and cut men, and he pulls me over. He's like, "Hey Frank, go look in the other dressing rooms of the other fighters and tell me what their uniforms are." I go, "Okay." So I went over, I looked at them all, I came back and I told him. He's like, "Oh, all right, perfect." That was the research back then. Like, what's his outfit? Because that's where the chasm we were crossing was from. Something brought into the idea of martial arts that slowly turned into a sport. And during that dark time, like, my job became make it a sport. So I was the spokesman. I was hired to go around, talk to everybody, try to figure out, hey, what do we need? And they, be rounds, or you need this and you need that. And so we would slowly keep adding to it and building up, what they needed for us to get back on cable and sort of reach the masses.
Right.
And so that was a fun part of my second phase of my career.
So what was he deducing by their outfits? I have to ask this. Like, what was the purpose? Right? I need to know this. I need to know this now.
Yeah. I've actually been waiting for that question for a long time because nobody picks that one up. No, because at the time, you really had, judo, Kempo karate. Like, you had these very basic, sort of martial arts styles that had been around for a while and had some mystique and provability, and so there's a lot of martial arts sort of in it.
Right.
Because that was the Nexus idea. The Nexus idea is, why can't martial, and this is Bob Meyerowitz's idea, this is not mine, but he told me when he started the UFC, it was because he was in a car ride with a friend of his who was the head of the judo commission, I believe it was. And Bob would always ask him, well, why can't the karate guy fight the judo guy? And the guy would be like, no, he can't, because their rules are different, all these different things. And so Bob liked the idea of, all these martial arts styles fighting and seeing which one was the best. Like, hey, who's the best? Like, let's figure that out, and then we'll do something about it. And that's how the UFC really started, was on that, martial arts idea.
Yeah, I mean, looking back, like, if you're looking in the dressing room, it's pretty easy to identify everybody. You got a judo gi, you got a karate gi, boxing gloves, wrestling shoes, maybe
you got one glove hanging up.
One glove.
It's Art Jimerson. I didn't know he was going to be here, but yeah, it was a wild time. Like, I saw a guy get knocked out in the semi-main event. He knocks a guy out. Woo! Harold Howard was his name. He's the biker guy from Canada. Funny guy. Knocks out, I think, Cal Worsham, elbow. Walking down the lights, and our ramp was really tiny, as well as the cage to get through. And when you're off television and get in the backstage for the UFC, to be in all these crazy venues. And he's walking. He's like, yeah, and the swinging light hits him right in the temple and just knocks him unconscious. He falls face first like this, just flat as a pancake. Boom, and he's out. And I'm like, holy hell! I was probably 22, maybe 23. And I was like, what on earth? And I was just starting to understand, like, what happens when you get knocked out. I'm like, well, that can't be good. And so they take him in the back, they put him on the table, and they give him smelling salts, wake him up. And within 12 minutes, he was out there fighting in the main event.
That's
I was
great.
like, yeah, I don't know. I think some regulations might be a good idea. And I think this is a really dangerous, activity.
Yeah, you knew they were in trouble when they gave the purse to the light for the fight.
It's scary. Yeah.
Well, speaking of uniforms too, like, I mean, it's wrestling shoes. I remember you had a grappling match, wasn't it, with Dan Henderson?
Yeah.
And the wrestling shoes plays a huge factor with leg locks.
Yeah.
I mean, like, actually, a heel hook, a toe hold, you can really get a good grip on there. And that's how you won. You won an unbelievable heel hook with that match, specifically with the wrestling shoes. Obviously, that's a huge advantage for leg locks, right?
Yeah. Well, a shoe is a handle. So that's why, unless you want to get on the game of handles. You don't want to play with it. But if you're in a box or, or do whatever, it's certainly something. Gives you a lot more traction. But
that was part of the controversy.
It's a straight up handle.
That was the big controversy with Ken versus Hoist, because I could be wrong, but I believe there was an argument about the rules where Hoist could wear the gi, but they didn't allow Ken to wear shoes. And Ken's argument was, well, you say your gi is a tool, it's a weapon. Well, so are my wrestling shoes. Not letting me wear those. I think that's how it went.
I bet there were so many, problems like that during that time. And, the shoe was coming, the shoe wasn't. This commission didn't want it, that wanted, and it was every time, a battle, especially after the media hit, and I was supposed to be like down. I'm like, hey guys, and they'd be like, you guys did it again. So it took us a long time.
And even in Pancrase, I think in Pancrase or shoot fighting, or which one of those is you can tap a guy, but then you keep going, or you go again, right? Or if you grab the ropes, it doesn't count.
Yeah, that's in Pancrase. Pancrase, you can grab the ropes. Yeah. Okay. But that's old professional wrestling. Remember, you guys? Yeah. You grab the rope, and they'd be like, "No, he's got the rope. What are you talking about?"
Yeah,
they'd be like, "Oh."
That's how crazy the rules were, because nobody even really knew in that first UFC what was. I think when Ken got tapped by Hoist, he was like ready to go again because he wasn't sure. Okay, you tapped me, but can't we go again? Because Pancrase rules kind of let that happen.
Yeah, and I also think it was, very new, and like I don't think Ken even understood what happened. He said, "What?" It's like I was wrestling, and my neck started hurting. What's happening? I just think because I remember I was really young. I was very studious, and I was just like, no one knows what they're talking about. Like, they're all over here, martial arts, tough guy. Like they're all on these different philosophies, but they weren't like studying the science of the human body and how do we do this and what are the mechanics, because we just hadn't, thought that. We're like cavemen. We hadn't thought that far yet. And, I was very blessed to be in that very early stage of like, super athletes, because, super athletes can do more and think more and have more blood flow. Like all this more stuff is going on when you're a super athlete. And so that became part of the mechanic. I was like, well, hey, these guys aren't super athletes like I am. That's going to be one of my forces, and that's going to be one of my values. But just having that mindset, which if you read books about war and philosophy and, strategy, they're all the same thing. You get yourself together, you get your plan, you get organized, you do your training, you get your purpose, you go do your thing. And that's really how fighting is, because it's a lonely, it's a lonely road. It's you in the gyms late at night with your friends, wondering what to do with all those sweaty shirts. Like, what do I do with all those shirts?
Well, watching your fights, you always seem to be enjoying yourself. Like you seem to always be like, entertaining, enjoying yourself while you're in the cage or the ring.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of that.
Yeah.
We had a clip.
We want to
bring up and get your reaction, because I mean, I remember seeing this years ago, and just it was hysterical, number one, and you can use that as a meme. I don't think anybody, even in the jiu-jitsu community, has really used that as a meme yet. We plan to. We plan to. So
I'm in no rush. I was just
yeah. So
time comes.
Yeah, so it was I believe in the 90s, and you had your fight with Boss, and both you guys are tied up in this leg lock exchange, and in those rules, what people don't know, you can only open palm strike. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Only open palm, can't close the fist.
And that was this is the second time you guys fought, when he was palm striking you in the face, and you were kind of just laughing at him. And that was a title bout, right?
Mm-hmm.
Probably. Yeah.
Okay.
It was one of my lesser successful strategies.
So we have that clip, and I think that
and I'm trying to find it.
Yeah, he's gonna find it, but that is like one of the most, I think, hysterical things that a lot of people, like the new generation, haven't even really seen that. So when we find that clip, we'll bring it up. We just want to get your reaction on it.
Yeah,
we're gonna turn it into a meme. We're definitely gonna turn this into a meme.
It's probably one of my favorite moments in martial arts, and I can't believe I can't find it right now.
And when that happened, did you say to yourself, fuck this, like I'm just gonna let him feel like his strikes are nothing? Is that pretty much what it came down to?
Yeah, I mean, it was really a psychology thing, and I was in full disclosure, I was kind of new to the whole, aggressive psychology thing.
Yeah.
But, and Boss and I become friends. After our first fight, we became friends. We hang out and party, and we didn't train together we didn't train together, but we hung out. And so when we fought, it was just really we're both very strong-willed. We're not going to lose. I already made up my mind I was going to, die in some, fiery death in the ring. So I always had to find ways to try to beat him. And, the first time was he didn't have enough knowledge. I was like, he doesn't have enough knowledge, and I'm faster and I'm better shape. And so I'll just outlast him. And then the second time I was like, same strategy, except I got about halfway and I was like, uh-oh, I'm actually tired. And he's stronger and he's using less energy, and he figured some of these things out. And so I'm running through my list of, strategies that I thought I could pull off. And at that time I was like, how do we get to Boss? And I know Boss is really sensitive. He doesn't like to be teased. He went through that when he was a kid. He was bullied, and that's one of the reasons he's become Boss Rutan.
Right.
So you just can't tease him. You can't tease him. Plus, it's kind of mean. So I thought, if I could tease Boss right now, he would get so mad and punch me right in the face and lose the point. And then I would be 1 point ahead. And if I could make it to the finish line and not lose an arm or a leg or get choked out, I could win this fight. I was like, that's plan B, because Boss is stronger and better than I last.
Well, we'll definitely bring in the live feed after we edit this video up, and it'll be live.
I don't know. I don't know why the file's not opening up for us. So hold on.
But actually, that you brought up a good point when you were talking about that, because in your head you felt like you were in a leg exchange with him, but you knew that you knew more in that specific area, right? Like you just had that feeling.
Yeah. I had that feeling, and this was also, early in the time of deep sports submissions, like with shoes and stuff, and your legs would break, people's ankles would snap off, and because the bones are all tightened up and compressed and being twisted. So there was always fear, you committed to something, and especially in the leg game where it's 50-50. If you have a leg, they have a leg, so it's a 50-50 game, and you don't want to go into half your battles and die. So that's why jiu-jitsu, other styles are like, no, don't worry about that stuff. Unless the guy's falling down and dying, don't worry about his leg, because there's too much risk in it. And so in that moment with Boss, I was like, there's risk. I'm tired. I underestimated him.
Oh man, he just opened up a big topic for me, man.
Yeah. Well, so when he was smacking you in the head, right? He was smacking your head. What made you go, I'm just gonna start sticking my tongue out at him?
That was, I think, the strike in.
Yeah. I felt like I was, in fifth grade, and I was, defiantly, making my point to make fun of him. And it worked. I mean, I probably would have not done that, just as a fighter, because I'd be like, well, that's weird, it's interesting.
It's my favorite moment in MMA. I'm just saying.
I have to agree.
It is one of my favorite moments.
More so than the armbar against Kevin Jackson. More so against the armbar. That was very good.
That was good.
We'll also add that clip in there too in the podcast. That was amazing.
Did you see the armbar on Tamura?
Tamura, that was a good one too, because I thought the arm went on that one.
It was done. Yeah, it was one of the most hugely fluid movements I've done in fighting, and it was extraordinary. And it was on the same weightlessness and flow as when I stuffed Igor Zinoviev. He just felt he felt like I was like, where is he? This is I'm just gonna jump on him just like in practice. I was like, this is wild. But I had that same nothing weighed anything, and I was just flowing through the whole thing.
Well, he brought up that topic, and I have to cover it now, which we were talking about the leg game. Now, when Brian and I came up, and I want to ask you about this, because in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specifically, and when Brian and I came up, it's a big stigma, even to this day. Leg locks, don't do them. We weren't even allowed to start to delve into leg locks until legal at brown belt.
Yeah, so high purple.
So, but I think that's a totally opposite view than what guys in shoot and catch wrestling experience, because you guys just delve into the leg game right away, right?
Yeah, we learn right away because it's part of a fuller performance with leg, this, that, and the other. But one of the things I learned early on was, nobody was like, hey, it's a 50-50 game. Nobody had deduced it that small. So I was like, why do I keep getting caught in legs? And I was like, well, he has your leg. And so one day I was like, it's like a 50-50 thing. Like, who wants to lose half of their things? And then that's when I started, talking to other studies and, styles and studying them, the grappling styles. And they're like, yeah, that's absolutely dangerous. It destroys people. Their knees, just unless they have enough knowledge or experience or training, they shouldn't be doing that because they're going to hurt each other. And I was like, wow, I never thought of that because this is how I was brought up. Boom, day 5, great, leg locks. Here's your position. And here's what you do. So yeah, but and then the one thing I was going to say about the differences in styles, maybe I did say it, is the submission wrestling that I learned, or shoot wrestling or shoot fighting, it's weight based. So it's becomes who can carry the least amount of weight, who can carry the most amount of weight, how can I distribute weight. So the whole concept is how can I fatigue and wear out and hurt this person by distributing weight on them. And that's one of the big differentiators that when I started doing jiu-jitsu, I was like, whoa, this is totally different. They're like holding me, keeping me here. Whereas in that, the sport I came from, it's like no position change, move, drill, pop, change, attack. It's just a different speed because of the entertainment need.
Different mental aspect, totally, of what you're looking to do.
And you're talking about, the weight changes. I mean, that is a base thing, probably across all types of wrestling, right? It's leaning your weight into them, holding them in position. Do you know what I mean? And making them carry your weight just to be tired the whole time.
Yeah, same in boxing. It's same, it's good understanding of weight distribution. And when I went and did all these different arts that were grappling, I had to get my gi. I was like, yeah, I'm in. And then I'm like, whoa, it's totally different. Like it's a whole different mindset. And that's one of the things that I think made the Lions Den group and sort of that generation that came from Japan with that mindset made us successful. Because even though we weren't as skilled as maybe some other people are skilled, in one area, through movement, activity, and attrition, we could, wear you down, knock you over, move position, create opportunity. And that's exciting. Like that's how you win fights. You change a moment to your advantage.
Yeah, create scrambles that create movement, that create openings, not just holding down, say side control and mount, kind of thing. It's totally different. Totally different.
Yeah, it's different. And the only downside is, which I didn't learn until I got older, is it just takes more energy.
Yeah.
Because you're the aggressive boxer. You have to constantly move forward and change and push. And so as you get older, you either get really smart, omit things, or you just stop doing it because you're like, wow, this is a lot of physical exertion. And at some point, your body is going to be like, hey, you need to chill out.
Yeah. What was your go-to, like after, training and you're coming up through, getting UFC fights, Tito, I mean, all these big fights, and specifically the grappling training, what did you kind of gravitate to? Were you like a leg guy, an armbar, Kimura, choke? Like what was your, ideal submission, if you will?
Yeah. I liked choking people. Because it didn't, put any responsibility on me that I might break their arm or their leg. So that was preferable. I was always like, ooh, it's a genius. Like, who came up with this? It's a perfect way to finish off somebody without hurting them. But with that said, my system was literally based on science. Like, what is the most probable? What is the least amount of energy? How do I do the most amount of damage? What are the biomechanical systems of structure? How do I defeat this organism, this machine, as efficiently as possible? And, I think that's where my thinking differed. Everyone had their martial art, their thing, did this and that. And I was like, dude, I'm a killing machine. Like, I train my body, these are the techniques. I understand what I'm facing. And at that time, everything was clear. You could, I learned most of my wrestling from picking up Dan Severn's book on wrestling. And I read the whole thing. I was like, wow, wrestling's actually quite simple. It's super hard to master. And that's my longest coach is a wrestling coach who coached me for 20 plus years because I sucked at wrestling. I was like, I gotta understand this more. Like, because if an Olympic wrestler can stop me from taking him down, he's gonna beat the hell out of me. Like he's gonna, I won't be able to control that if I don't, have the skill.
Yeah.
So I was always trying to study wrestling, and I always sucked at it.
And that's one of the things in a fight. If you're controlling it, you could slow down the fight if you're tired. You could put it in the position you want for a submission or whatever the case is. And wrestling's a lot about control, and position.
You determine if you're going to stay standing, or you determine if you're going to be on the ground,
or you're going to get up.
Yeah, or get up, or fight in the cage, or there's a lot of strength in who can control the takedown and that thing. And as a sport for me, besides getting old, my body falling apart, watching the evolution of the sport, it just got more and more dangerous because better wrestlers came, better grapplers came, and better strikers came, and the whole thing just kept growing. So for me, where when I was near the end of my prime, striking was the biggest value, and then having a good solid ground game and great conditions. And so I was spending all my time doing striking. But the people a few years before me were way ahead of me in striking and would totally break my face. So it was always this catch-up game of how can I perfect this system into what my body is now? How does all this fit right now? Because now is the next moment when I go perform. And the cool thing about that time is you'd fighting jiu-jitsu. You'd have a whole different experience, and you go train with different people, study different things, study different psychologies, philosophies, ideas, fights. And that was a really fascinating part for me.
Well, that's you talk about the wrestling and how important it is to determine where you actually end up. We had Kenny Florian say the same thing. Look at all the UFC champions over time. What was their base, and what's one of the most important bases? And to your point, you fought Kevin Jackson, an Olympic gold medalist wrestler, and because you were such of a strategist in MMA, you had the wrestling background, you did the grappling, leg locks, some striking, but because you were facing an Olympic gold medalist, you actually wound up using an armbar from the bottom. I mean, that's the epitome of MMA, Yeah.
And it was, but I can tell you how I beat him. I found a guy who had wrestled him and beat him, and then I was like, "Hey, will you coach me?" And he's like, "Yeah." The guy, and then it was through training with him that I was like, these guys don't really understand what's happening with the arms and the placement and the body, because if you study wrestling's very different. The weight distribution, the needs, because the rules are different. And so there was just a lack of understanding. And like when I told my coaches that I was fighting Kevin Jackson, they're like, "You can't do that. He's going to kill you." He's like, "You suck at wrestling." I go, "I know, it's terrible, right?" I go, "But I have this theory that they don't understand what's going on, that I can use the energies, that are happening, and I can, get into submission holds and positions where if I can't break something, I can scare the shit out of them or choke them, and, I can make something happen here." But yeah, it was terrifying, the level of athleticism and, all that was coming, in the sport. It was, these guys were studs. Kevin Jackson was a stud. I was like, "Oh my God, look at this guy." It was insane. Watching all of his wrestling stuff, watching him, train, I was like, this guy's a monster. So it took a lot of, study and belief and teamwork to figure out, how do we beat this guy? And I beat him using, an idea in grappling, which was, there's no way I'm going to be able to stop his force or technique. So what I need to do is find a way to slow it down enough so I can reposition myself, knowing what he'll do once he gets into position to do a takedown. And that was it. And I broke down the dynamics of takedown, and then and I ended up in the armbar position. So that's I did the same exact technique, a bazillion times to these, Stanford wrestlers. And they'd be like, "What are you doing?" Because I'd act like I was wrestling. And I'd be like, "Oh, no, I'm not. I'm actually going over here. I'm going to fall down and grab your arm." They're like, "That's not wrestling." I'm like, "No, it's not. But I got your arm." And that's all I need.
So it's interesting. You brought up a good point, right? You were able to find the guy who actually beat him, right? But back in the day, there was a lot less footage. When you first started out, it's not like you could do research. So how was it different almost preparing for a fight then? I mean, besides Ken going in the dressing room, like you guys going in the dressing room and checking stuff out, but how was it different when you prepared for a fight back then, when there was a lot, when YouTube didn't exist or these things didn't exist, where you could really do research on your opponents?
Yeah. I mean, there was really two types of fighters: people that didn't like tape, and then people that liked, tape. And I like tape because I studied the body, so I could see, when bodies were moving efficiently, and I could sort of guesstimate, the amount of power and energy and efficiency, that the body was using. And then, I like it because I can see the tails, the hitches and, lifts and like whatever's happening in the body structure. So, yeah, I mean, it was a huge boon because, yeah, they'd be like, okay, listen, you're fighting a guy from Holland. He's really tough. And then they would leave and you'd be like, oh man, what? this is terrible.
That's right.
So, yeah.
You're like, I'm just going to, when he smacks me, I'm just going to to stick my tongue out at him and see what happens.
Like, I've got a plan. I've got a foolproof plan. Well, you notice I never did that again because, I lost the fight. And then I realized like it just made Boss mad, and Boss mad is worse than Boss not mad. And I was like, well, that was, a bad strategy. We're going to toss that one up.
Yeah, no, that was my favorite moment still. I don't care. Strategy enough, Frank. My favorite moment.
Yeah. And there were two really distinct points in my specific training that I was like, wow, I really want to study not only wrestling, but catch, shoot fighting and things like that. One of them was following your career. The other one was following a guy that I always thought that I would love to have seen you two guys fight in MMA in your prime, and that's Kazushi Sakuraba.
Oh yeah, Sakuraba. Oh yeah.
What's your thoughts on him? Because a lot of people don't even realize with him he is, catch professional wrestling background. And, maybe thinks he's just, Japanese grappling, but I mean, that's it. I don't know if was it the same roots, not Fujiwara, right? Or was it just?
Yeah. We have the same roots, but I can't remember exactly how they're connected, but basically the same system, which is, a 10 position, weight-based grappling system, with rope escapes, which now is, full MMA and there's no more rope escapes. But the rope escapes were cool because you'd get a guy, smother him, you give a guy your leg that didn't really know a leg lock and he'd spend all his energy, into getting it. And then if he even got it, you just grab the rope and be like, hey, good job. And then kick him in the leg because he's all tired. So it was really an interesting, addition to the fight game because it prolonged it. It made it more dramatic. It made, I'm sure it made great television, for the Japanese. That's why we were doing it for them.
Yeah. For me, that I think, you and him specifically, when people realize the backgrounds and how similar and how amazing of an impact they made in the MMA world, people can open their eyes to different grappling styles and really making an eclectic kind of, thing and combining it, with all the different backgrounds can only benefit guys in MMA in the future. I think that's huge. Now, what about yourself? Are you doing your own, you still training, or are you just focusing on certain things and business wise, or what?
Yeah, no, I mainly, I work as a dad, and we have a family nonprofit, which we do a lot of social outreach for at-risk youth, incarcerated youth. We do martial arts scholarships, education scholarships, art scholarships. So I keep busy with that. And the speaking thing, I'm always doing speaking somewhere. I got some, asks to go back into broadcasting, so I might do that. But yeah, I've been really enjoying this past, what was supposed to be 8 years turned into, about 12 years of just spending time with my daughter and, not worrying about, being famous and, like I don't go to fights, to me, I just live an entirely different sort of lifestyle now. And don't go to the gym. I just hike every day, in the morning and spend time in nature, spend time out and about. But it's been a great journey. Like I can't, all my dreams from childhood, came true. And even though the journey was, here, there, this, that, trained in, so many different martial arts styles, grappling styles, striking styles, all kinds of stuff. I really believe mind, body, spirit is how you build yourself. And, when have a good purpose and you're studying something, it's just such a good human connector, where you can be on a similar journey with somebody, discovering it together, whether that's, beating up your buddies or, just training on a Saturday, like whatever that is, that human connection has been so powerful for me. So I'm always trying to get kids into it. I'm always trying to, remind people to train. I just think it's such an enhancement to your life. And plus if the zombie apocalypse comes, you're trained, like you got the basic skills and you're not like, you're not going,
That's right. Especially if you're like choking them, right? You can just pop the head right off.
Yeah, I guess you got to destroy the brain, which the whole concept of the zombie thing and the brain, and it's really interesting to me because it's just our brain going, okay, there's things we don't really get, and I feel like it's coming and it's in some rotten guy's brain. So it's really interesting how our society looks at that stuff and interplays with it, and even fighting. To me, it's always been intriguing to see the change in a human being when they see what's happening. Mm-hmm. And then at first they're like, no, and then they're like, oh yeah, and they just like go bananas.
Yeah. Yep.
You're like, whoa, wow, like, but it's you from human to human. I've just seen it, hundreds of thousands of people, and it's the same thing. They're like, oh, this is scary. Like, oh, okay, oh, damn, oh yeah, and then they're bloodthirsty. Down with him.
Exactly.
So it's super cool.
Yeah, there's something so primal, right? When it comes to people watching this stuff, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's true.
So Frank, where can everyone find more about you, man? Where can they find stuff about you and what you're doing, your public speaking, everything?
Pretty much everything's on my social media, which is at Frank Shamrock, everywhere, and on YouTube I'm at the Frank Shamrock. But yeah, I put it out all on my social media stuff, so you can hit me up there.
Nice. And what last question for me is now the outside looking in, and your career, and now seeing MMA and watching it from the outside. What do you think the future is of MMA in general? Like, where do you think it's going?
Well, it's going to keep evolving. The cool thing about the sport, because it's talent driven, there's actually so few talents in the world. The technical skill, the physical skill will keep evolving. So I think that'll be a positive thing. There's such desire for, mixed martial arts and this type of sporting entertainment. And now that it's been seen, like people are like, boxing is just not as exciting anymore. So I just think there's a huge chance for it to become one of these, global sports that everyone can participate in. And my larger hope is, of course, that they all hang out and do martial arts together. But I do see like endless growth for the sport because, what everyone has been able to accomplish in mixed martial arts from every level is, show the value of this as like a social development tool, like a social purpose, like how it helps people. And, whether you're 6 years old and you're trying to figure it out, or you're 20, or it doesn't matter where you come at, on your journey, just that mindset, that discipline, that lifestyle, like going to fights, like doing the whole thing. It's a really fun, cool, and purposeful life. It has helped so many people. And, when we, give away these scholarships through our family charity, you just see the impact it has when some kids are like, all right, listen, we're going to pay for your martial arts. All you got to do is follow the rules and be a good kid, stop getting in trouble. And then, they're in college 4 years later, or West Point, or, it's just so powerful to see what, one person could do when they're given a little bit of support and help. And, nobody needs more help than their martial artists on their first day or second day or third day.
So true.
30th day or 300th day.
Yeah.
I've been like the greatest fighter in the world. And I was like, I don't even, like, what am I doing? Like, this doesn't make any sense.
Well, man, once again, we really appreciate you coming on. Really a legend in the sport, and really inspiration for me. I'm sure for Brian too.
Absolutely.
And just love to see what you're doing out there now with the foundation and the charity, and really good to see that. You don't really see that a lot in the sport. Guys either make a ton of money, retire, but you really don't hear about the the behind the scenes where guys are really doing some good out there.
Yeah, it's beautiful how you're just giving back. You know what I mean? Especially knowing some of your backstory and seeing some documentaries on you, man. It's great to see. Keep doing what you're doing, man. It's awesome.
Yeah, and make sure you guys follow.
Thanks, guys.
Make sure you guys reach out on any platform. At Frank Shamrock, FrankShamrock.com. Catch a lot of his live speeches on YouTube. There's a lot of them. A lot of speaking engagements he's done is already on YouTube. There was one specific I saw that had a huge impact, talking about your childhood. It was really, amazing and empowering, to see you really open up like that. So I really encourage everybody to just, type in Frank Shamrock, live speech, or, speech on YouTube. There's plenty of material out there, really just inspiring. So really appreciate it. And make sure you guys like, subscribe, make sure you follow Frank on all of his socials. And then Frank, stick around after we end the show. All right.
Cool. Yeah, we'll do.
you.